Okay, so today, oops, are we all set up here? Today, we are starting the final module in CS50. We're in the home stretch as far as CS50 is concerned. So we're starting in on JavaScript. It seems like ever since we stopped with C, we've been throwing a lot of different languages at you, right? I think that's a good thing, and I hope one of the things that you've seen is that after you learn your first language, it's very, well, it's a lot easier to pick up your second, third, fourth languages, right? It's not as hard as it was the first time around because a lot of the concepts are the same. So that's kind of a reoccurring theme that is true today as well. So let's talk about JavaScript. Can somebody give me some examples of how JavaScript is like PHP? Because that's what we just spent the last module talking about, right? Was PHP. We're talking about JavaScript. Yeah. It's a loosely typed language, right? So we don't have to declare types with our variables. That's a nice thing. What else? What else are some similarities? Yeah. Yeah, so we mix it in with the HTML just like we did with PHP. Yep. What else? There's lots of similarities, lots of things they have in common. Any others? Yeah. It's an interpreted language. What does that mean again? We talked about that a little bit last week. What does it mean for it to be interpreted? We don't have to compile it. What are the implications then of that? I'm sorry? Yeah, so we're actually looking at each line of code individually and then executing it one by one, instead of the compiler, which goes through and converts everything over to binary before it gets executed. That's exactly right. Any other similarities between the two? Yes. Yeah, so they both have this concept of like an associative array, but it's not called an associative array in JavaScript. What is it called in JavaScript? It's actually up here. It's an object. We're going to talk about objects a little bit later on. What about stuff like the control stuff that we've seen, if statements, loops, functions? How does that compare between JavaScript and PHP? It's pretty much the same, right? It's pretty much the same, which is a great thing. If you understand how a loop works in C, you understand how a loop works in JavaScript. That's a pretty common thing across the board with programming languages. Once you understand how a loop works, you know how a loop works in many different languages. That's why it's so easy for us to pick up new languages when we need to. That's a nice thing about programming in general. What are some differences? What are some differences between two? Yeah. There we go. So JavaScript is on the client side, PHP is on the server side. What does that actually mean? How does that affect execution? Yeah. Right. So we did a lot of form processing in PHP, for example, right? But in order for that to happen, we actually had to send the stuff out to the server. The server had to process it on the server side and then display the results. If we're doing stuff on the client side, we can actually process it immediately and display the results immediately. Where's that processing actually happening? Which machine's running that stuff? It's this one, right? Or the one that's sitting in front of you, right? Those are clients. Those are the client machines. So we're actually asking the user's computer to do some work for us on these JavaScript pages. Yeah, what are some other differences between the two? That's a big one. Any other differences you guys can think of? So we mentioned a bunch of similarities. We didn't mention too many differences. There are some syntactical differences, right? So for example, declaring variables in JavaScript looks a little bit different than it did in PHP. Those dollar signs went away. What are they replaced with? Var, right? So we just use var to declare variables. So that's a little bit easier. Or not necessarily easier, just different. Let's talk about these objects a little bit more. How do objects act compared to associative arrays? Are they the same thing? Are they different at all? Some of both? Anybody get a feel for that? Yeah. Yeah, so we can embed objects inside of one another. Is that true of PHP associative arrays? Could I have embedded a thing inside an associative array? Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think we asked you to do that on one of the studios, and it tripped a lot of people up. Sorry about that, but not really sorry about that. That's how we learn, by tripping ourselves up. So they actually, that's a nice thing. That's a nice thing to be able to do. It gives us a lot of flexibility. What are some other, yeah? Staggered arrays. So they don't have to have the same. Yeah. So so this kind of goes back actually I think more to the C style of coding, where if I create a two-dimensional array, it has to be a rectangle. I have to have the same number of columns and rows. Yeah. Right. I can't have a jagged array. In both PHP and JavaScript, I can have varying numbers of things assigned to each particular key. So that's another nice thing. That's more flexibility. More flexibility is a good thing. I'm sorry? I can have a function in an object. Yeah, that's an interesting concept that we're going to talk a lot about and actually try to use some of that stuff in some of the exercises today. We can treat functions like things, like variables. It's this idea of functional programming, which you may or may not have heard thrown about as you've been reading about some of these programming concepts. So we're going to start going down that wormhole a little bit today. I think if you decide to take the web track, you'll explore those concepts in a little bit more detail. Syntactically, there's differences as well, right? Syntactically, if I'm creating a Java object, I need those curly braces. I always screw that up. You're going to see me screw that up today, I promise. It's pretty much a guarantee that I'm going to try and use square brackets instead. So somebody please call me out when I do that. In fact, that's probably, going back to what I was talking about before, that's probably the hardest thing about picking up a new language is the syntax, right? Most of the stuff works the same. You just need to be able to say it properly to the computer so that it understands what you're saying. That's syntax, right? That's syntax. The more languages you know, the easier it is to get your syntax screwed up and type in the wrong thing. It happens all the time. What is JSON? We've actually seen JSON before. Where did we see JSON before? When did we see it? LaunchCode. Yeah, best name for a studio ever. So what is it? What's JSON? Yeah. JavaScript object notation. Sure, absolutely. Yeah, it's a list of key value pairs. Exactly. So it's really just a way to structure data. That's really it. It's a way to structure data. In fact, sort of a tangent, but also interesting, we learned about databases last week, right? We learned about SQL. JSON is the basis for a kind of database that's become very popular recently called MongoDB. MongoDB is a database that's built around using JSON to represent the data instead of the SQL tables, columns, and rows that we learned about last week. So if you like web programming, if you like JSON, MongoDB might be something interesting for you to take a peek at some point. Yeah. So we use JSON because it's very convenient for us. It's pretty easy to specify JSON syntax. And it works really well with JavaScript. All right. Last but certainly not least, what's an anonymous function? Who can describe what an anonymous function is to me? So what does it mean for something to be anonymous in general? If I just say the word anonymous, what does that mean? Nameless. So if an anonymous function then is a function without a name, right? But there's a little bit more to understanding it than just that. An anonymous function is often going to be defined right where I need to use it, right where I intend to use that function. So the reason it doesn't have a name is because I'm going to assign it to something specific. Anybody know what that specific thing is that I'm assigning this function to? An event, right? We use anonymous functions a lot with events. Exactly. So because it's bound to that event, there's no need for us to apply a name to it. anytime that event fires, then it just automatically executes that function. We don't care what it's called. We just need it to do whatever it is that it's supposed to do. If you start going down JavaScript, if you start going down the web programming rabbit hole, you're going to see lots and lots more anonymous functions come into play. We're going to do some work with anonymous functions today, as a matter of fact. It's, you know, that's probably actually conceptually one of the biggest challenges about learning JavaScript is getting used to using these anonymous functions. Cool. Any questions before we move on to the next stuff? All right, let's talk about the DOM. What is this? DOM? What is that? Somebody explain what that is. Document object model. So how does that relate to our web pages? Where do I get this from? What is it? How do I get the DOM? What does the DOM represent in our? What is the DOM represented by in our web pages? It's a tree, so we're getting closer. We're getting warmer to what I'm looking for here. So last week I actually asked you to make a tree or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I don't remember. I asked you to actually make trees for certain things. What did I ask you to make trees for? The HTML. Yeah. So we can treat the HTML as a tree, and if we do so, that's called the document object model, right? I can grab that tree and then I can look for specific elements in that tree, so specific tags, or I can look things up by ID or by their name, or I can insert new elements into the DOM. I can use JavaScript to perform some processing for me, to make some decision for me, and then update the HTML right away to reflect that decision that was made. That's a very nice thing for our websites to be able to do. Oh, so I guess I kind of just answered the second question, didn't I? What is it used for? It's the structure of our page, and I can use JavaScript or other dynamic programming languages to manipulate the DOM to change what content's displayed on my websites. So how does JavaScript interact with the DOM? What's that process look like? What am I going to see in the code if JavaScript is messing around with stuff in the DOM? Get element by ID. So what does that do? What's an element? Yeah. It's a node on the tree. And so if we take that one step farther, what's a node on the tree represent? An HTML tag. So when I say get element, I'm really looking for a specific tag in the DOM, in the HTML. So then there's the ID. What's the ID? The name of the tag, not quite, but we're getting warm. Yeah. The ID attribute, good. So when I declare a tag in my HTML, one of the attributes I can assign to it is the ID. We actually use the ID for other stuff. What else do we use the ID for in the past? CSS, right? We use certain selectors to pick up tags by their IDs and display them in particular ways. Well, we're going to use those IDs with our JavaScript as well to manipulate those tags and do things with those tags. So I can use that to find certain things in the DOM. And then I can do other things with those tags once I pull them out. I can see any values that are embedded in the tags. And as I'm going to show you a little bit later today, I can insert new elements into the DOM if I want to. So I can add stuff into the tree based on certain actions that are performed. Okay. I think that's all the review questions I had. Were there any review questions or questions about the stuff we talked about before we do some exercises? Alrighty, exercise number 1. This will look a little familiar to you, actually. If you remember, I think this was last week, we made a form using PHP to display capitals of countries. So the first thing that I want us to do today is take that and rewrite it to not use PHP, but do it all client-side, do it all using JavaScript. Before I turn you loose on this, I actually have this completed. So let me show you how I want it to behave, how I want it to work, right? It's going to have to behave a little bit differently since we're doing things client-side instead of server-side. It'll behave mostly the same. Give me a minute while the screen catches up, hopefully, here. Maybe not. Come on. There we go. So hopefully this looks a little bit familiar to you, right? So I have a little drop down here with some countries in it, and I can select one of these and click the submit button. And now, instead of taking me to a separate page, I just had it pop up a box that says the capital of USA is Washington, D.C. Right, so that's a little bit different than how we did it before with PHP. We couldn't easily do something like this in PHP, right? We need the client-side powers of JavaScript to be able to pull stuff like this off. There was one other thing that we had to pay attention to last time. Do you remember what that was? One other thing we had to pay attention to with this little form. There's an error condition that we needed to handle. What if I don't pick one, right? It says to pick one. What if I don't? What if I don't pick a country? So if I click this, you see it says you must select a country, right? So it's actually going to detect that I left this as the default and tell me, hey, go pick one of the items. Go pick something. And that's basically it. We're actually going to add some more stuff to this a little bit later. But all I want to do for starters is to recreate this using JavaScript. Now, if you want to help yourself, get a start in the right direction, you could use your PHP form if you have it available, or if you don't have that PHP form, it's on Piazza. I posted this very file, the PHP version of this file, on Piazza when we did this a few weeks back. So go do a search for it on Piazza. This would be a great starting point, so you don't have to duplicate all the work for the drop-down box and that kind of stuff. Otherwise, I'm going to give you some time to get going on this. Take all the PHP out. You'll notice my version is called .html. There's not a single PHP line of code left in my solution. It's all been converted over to JavaScript. So take a few moments, or more than a few moments, talk to your neighbors, let us know if you have any questions, and we'll go over my solution in just a little bit. Alrighty, why don't we start trying to piece together a solution to this one. I'm going to ask you guys to help me out. So what we see right now is the version of our form that we used for PHP. And my first question for you is there anything that I need to change about what is up here? We're going to have to add some JavaScript eventually, right? We'll get to that part. But is there anything I need to change about what's currently up here right now before we get started? Yeah, I want to get rid of the PHP. I want to use JavaScript for this, so I don't need this action anymore. What about this method? I don't need that anymore either. I can get rid of that. I can get rid of that. Okay, so far so good. I think in terms of the form, those are the only things we need to take out. However, there's something that we could add in that's going to make our lives easier a little bit later. An ID, so we should stick an ID in for this guy. Doesn't really matter what you call it. I'll call it country form, sure. The reason I didn't select country is because I already used that down here, so I wanted to make sure to choose a different one. And now we're ready to start writing some JavaScript code. So, where should I start putting this stuff? I want to write some JavaScript to do the form processing for me. Where should I put it? At the bottom? So, for now, we're going to stick it after the form, which is important because I need this form to actually exist before the JavaScript can do its job. I can't write JavaScript to act on this form until after the form already exists. On Thursday, we'll see a different way of approaching this problem that allows us to change that up a little bit. But for now, we'll stick it in down here, and then what do I need to put in here to start writing JavaScript code? I need a script tag. That's what I got to start with. I'll leave myself some space. Okay? So what do I want to do? Let's think through this process a little bit, right? I want to get whatever value was selected. I want to look up the country, find the capital for that country, and then display it to the user. What do we use in PHP to store the capitals for the different countries? We use an associative array. So if we wanted to kind of use a similar mechanism in JavaScript, we could, right? We could use an object instead. So I think that would be a good thing to do. So let's create an object that contains these countries as keys and the capitals as their values. How am I going to do that? What do I need to type next? Var. Var something. That's right. Equals, and then what do I use for an object? I need curly brackets for this guy. And then the key, I just type in as normal. And then what do I put after the key? Colon, and then I put the value in. Right? Comma, Canada, colon, Ottawa. Did I spell that right? No? I heard both. Yes and no. Ottawa. That looks a little better. No disrespect to any Canadians in the audience. Mexico, Mexico City. All right, that's good enough. That's good enough. All right. So I've got this object that I can use to track the capitals for each of the countries. Now, how am I going to check to see what they entered and process that information? What do I need in order to pull that one off? So I heard that I need to get an element. Which element is it that I'm going to need to get? I'm sorry? The form. I need to get the form element. I need to get the form element, right? So maybe I'll stick that into a variable as well. I'll say var form equals get element by ID. There we go. I need to say document dot. What is this document? What is that? That's my DOM, right? That's my document object model. That's where all the stuff is in this web page. So I say get element by ID, and then what goes inside the parentheses here? The ID of the form, which I said was country. So I get that guy, and then what am I going to do with this form once I have it? How do I process the values on this form? It's actually, let me ask a more specific question. I need to wait for them to click the button, right? They click the button, and then I process the form. So how do I tell it to do that? Yeah. Form.onSubmit. Yeah, and you can see it's helping me out here, right? It's helping me out, kind of. OnSubmit. Well, I gave a little bit away. What do I need to do next? What am I going to set this to? An anonymous function. Good. So we're going to use an anonymous anonymous function here. We didn't have to do it this way. We could have used a non-anonymous function if we really wanted to. I think the code gave an example of doing it that way, but I would prefer to use an anonymous function. So how do I create an anonymous function? Just type the word function. Yeah, that's it. Boom. And then I need to give the input parameters next, which for this function, do I need any input parameters? No. So I can just put parentheses and then the brackets, right? And actually, I kind of want to put this guy inside of the function. So I'm going to move this object inside the function, since that's where we actually need it, right? That's where we actually need this guy. I'll just stick it inside the function. It seems to be unhappy with me. I seem to have made a mistake. What did I do wrong here? Yeah, I don't need the parentheses there. Thank you. I remember to use the right brackets, but I just put some extra parentheses in there. Any questions about what we've done so far? We're not done yet. We still got some work to do, but any questions about what we've done up until this point? Okay, so what's next? I've kind of got two things I need to do next. I need to make sure that they selected something, right? I need to make sure that they actually selected a country. And then I also need to make, if they did select a country, then I need to display the capital for that particular country, right? So how am I going to begin down that path? I've got a decision to make, right? So if I'm, oh gosh, what did I do? I deleted a bunch of stuff. There we go. So I've got a decision to make. I want to do a little bit of validation on this. So how am I going to, let's do the error condition first. How am I going to validate this to make sure they selected a country? What am I going to check? Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to check to see whether they left the selector on its default value or not. So how do I do that? What do I need? Somebody tell me what I need to start typing in here. I need an if statement for sure. And now I need to check to see that selector to see what it contains. So how do I do that? Any ideas? Can I scroll up? I sure can. So this guy doesn't have an ID, right? It does have a name. It does have a name. Think about this in terms of the DOM. Think about this in terms of the DOM. I have this form element. I see this select is inside of the form. What's the official term that we use when something's inside of something else? What do we say? It's a child. It's a child, right? So I can actually access children by name in the DOM. I have the form here. You see I've got this form here. So if I want to pull this selector out, I can say form dot not quite value. I need to pull the selector out first, which is called country, right? That's what I called this thing right here. It's called country. See that? Form.country will get me this guy. And then if I want to see what it actually has, what value it has, then I can say dot value. Does that make sense? That's a very important piece of the solution. This is my form. This is the element that I pulled out of the DOM. I need to pull the child element out, which is the selector. So I use the name of the selector, country, and then I want to actually get the value out of that selector, so I say dot value, which gets me the value. Which value am I looking for? I'm trying to do the error condition. I'm trying to do the validation piece. So how do I decide whether I have which value am I looking for, and how do I check for it? I'm looking for none. I'm looking for this one right here. So how do I check I have selected as none? I can just use equals equals none. It is a single quote, but in JavaScript it's pretty flexible with these quotes. You could probably do it either way. Actually, maybe not. Oh, okay. It was unhappy with me for a second, but then it went away. Yep. And so what do I want to do when this happens? I want to make a box pop up. How do I do that? Alert. And then I just say, please select country. Let's test this. We're not done yet, but I am a big fan of testing as you go instead of waiting for the end. So let's see if we can test this out a little bit. I've got this saved as country form PHP. Why won't it save? Is my internet acting up on me? Sure is. It says it's saving, but it's just kind of hanging. Give it a minute. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this real quick, since my server root folder is this one right now and not this one. So I'm just going to copy it over and then go back. And if I switch this to PHP, this should be, all right. So if I click submit, I expect to get an alert that says, please select a country. That's good. That's what we just did. If I pick a country, though, if I pick something and then I click submit, nothing happens. Nothing happens. Well, something actually did happen. Did you see it? It refreshed the page. Why did it do that? Yeah. Yeah, because I didn't put return false. Where do I need to stick that? After the alert? Let me ask you this. Do I ever want to return true for this particular exercise? No, I don't. When do I want to, what's the big deal? What does it mean for it to return true versus return false in this particular case? What am I actually telling it to do? Yeah. Yeah, so if I actually want to send stuff out to the server, then which do I use, true or false? True. If I'm not actually sending anything back to the server, I'm just displaying something on the client side, which is all we're trying to do, then I just want to use false. So since I never want to use true, I can just, down here at the bottom of my function, say return false. Just no matter what, return false. Let's save that and try this one again to see. All right, that still works. Let me do a refresh here just to make sure. And then this one, all right. Seems to be okay. All right, so we did a little bit of validation. We're not done yet. We still need to do the part where we display the capital for the country that they selected. So how are we going to do that? What do I need to do next? I need an else. So if they didn't select something, I'll tell them to select something. If they did select something, then I'll give them the answer that they want. So how do I do that? I need to find the capital for whatever it is that they asked for. How can I do that? How can I get the capital? They chose a country. I want to get the capital out. Yeah. I'm sorry, I had a little trouble hearing you there. I heard the first part. So you get the country that they submitted. I agree with that. I want to use this though, right? I want to use this object that we created. We created it for a reason. I want to use it. So I get the value that they submitted, the country that they submitted. how can I use that value in this object to get the capital that I want? How can I do that? Yeah. So let me create a variable for this, capital. So capital equals. So you're saying capitals, bracket, and then what goes in the brackets? Form.country.value. Perfect. Perfect. Get the value that they submitted. We had this before, right? We just checked this up here. So this is the value that they selected. So take that value that they selected, plug it into the object. It's going to spit the capital back out. And now I have it inside of this variable. So now all I have to do is display it. So that's just going to be another alert. So I'll say the capital of, and then how do I add the name of the country in here? What am I going to do? I go outside of the quotes and then what? Plus. What's that plus sign mean? Concatenation, right? Concatenation. And then I can add in the name of the country that they selected, which is just what? Yeah, did you have a question? I'm sorry? They are the right brackets, actually. Yeah, thank you for asking me, though. Thank you for asking me. I use curly brackets when I create the object. When I use the object, I use square brackets. That's a confusing part of JavaScript. Yep. I'm actually surprised that I used the right brackets there. So, pat on the back for me. Okay. All right, so I want to put the name of the country here. We know what that is. We've used that twice already. Form.country.value is, and then I just want to stick my variable in here, right? Capital, semicolon. Make sense? Any questions before we try this out? Let's try this out. I'm going to refresh just so I get the new version. I'll pick the USA, and oh, I broke it. What did I do wrong? Hang on. I made a mistake somewhere. Saved it. I don't know why that was there, but let me just refresh this guy real quick. Try one more time. Nope. Yeah, I know I'm still in .php. I kind of did that somewhat intentionally. What did I do wrong here? I must be missing something. Yours is working? Okay, well that's good. That's what matters. That's what matters. Put yours in single quotes. I mean, sure. We can always try it. I made a mistake somewhere. Not sure what it is yet. I made a mistake somewhere. I'm sorry? There's an capitals. Capital is this variable that we created. Am I missing a semicolon somewhere? That's a very good question. I miss those a lot. It looks like it's okay though. Am I missing any brackets? Am I missing any parentheses? I think it's okay. I'm not sure what I screwed up here. Line 32. Thank you. That might be it. Let's see. I should refresh the page first. Sorry. It could just be. Oh, come on. Do what I want. Computer, please. Let's see. Nope, that wasn't it. I'm not sure where my mistake lies. Clearly I did something wrong. Clearly I screwed something up. Well, this is a good learning experience though. Let me show you how you can debug this stuff. If you want to debug your JavaScript code, I just right-click the page and I hit inspect. There's a tab up here for sources. I believe you saw this in previous stuff, right? Control P opens the file. Here's the one that I want. And it shows me, so there's the problem. It doesn't seem to have saved my stuff. So that's not my fault. It doesn't seem to have saved my stuff because the code's not there. It just has my error condition. It doesn't have the rest of the stuff for whatever reason. Close the browser and reopen it? Yeah, it's probably a good idea. Let me try it again. Nope. It's still, my thing is just not cooperating with me for whatever reason. Let me try this one more time and see. Sources? Yeah, it still doesn't have it. Why not? What do I do? That's weird. I'm running server. No, I mean my original form works, so I can cheat and just use the original one that I had. That's not as fun, but I can do it. This one works. I know it does because yeah. And if I look at the code, actually for this one, it should be pretty much identical to the one that we just did. So a little bit different. I did it all in one line instead of 2 lines, but it looks exactly the same, right? Looks exactly the same, basically. I'm not sure why it's not picking up my, it's just not. Yeah, I just split it up into 2 lines instead of doing it all in one, that's all. It does exactly the same thing. I just split this off into a separate line on my other one. They should be functionally equivalent. It's not saving the changes that I made to this for whatever reason, even though I sit here and save it 100 times. It doesn't want to save. I'm not sure why. Maybe it doesn't like the PHP extension. I'm not sure. That doesn't seem right either. But I'm not going to spend time worrying about it. If it works for you, that's what I care about primarily. The code that I have, I believe, is correct. So, are there any questions about this exercise before we try another one? Got one more for us to work on. Alrighty, let's try another one. This one we'll probably do together as a group because it does introduce a new concept that I don't think you saw in the prep work today. So let's take a look. We're going to make a modification on that form that we just wrote, actually. So here's what I want to do next. I want to, instead of displaying facts, I want to turn this into a quiz. So now, instead of just selecting a country and displaying the capital, I want you to select a country and then type in what the capital is, and then our code will tell us whether you're correct or not. Right? That's what I want to do next. But I want to do it a little bit differently. Let me show you the end result here. Let me show you the end results of what this looks like. I called it countryform2.html. So the layout's a little bit different. The reason why that is the case, actually, that's not even really necessary. It was just kind of bothering me, honestly. But anyhow, so now the way that it works is if I select the USA, it wants me to put in Washington, D.C. as the answer. If I click submit, it says you are correct, right? So it's become a little quiz now. It's checking my answer. If I put in something that's wrong, like St. Louis, and I click submit, it says you're incorrect, right? So that seems easy. If I don't select a country, if I leave that set, right? I click submit, it says you must select a country. But there's one other form validation that we have to worry about now, and this is where things get a little bit different. So let's say I do select a country, but I leave this guy blank. I leave it blank. Watch what happens when I click submit. Right? So now it's actually injecting new information into the web page. In order to accomplish this, we're going to have to insert something into the DOM. We're going to have to actually create a new element and insert it into the DOM. So that's really, I think, the important piece of this guy, of this exercise. So we're going to do this one together. And we're going to start where we left off. In fact, although this one doesn't work. Well, we're going to be optimistic. And we're We're going to be optimistic and hope that it does work once I'm done. That's really bothering me. Anyhow, that's okay. So we're going to start with where we left off. So let's do the easy stuff first. I have a new text box, right? I have a new, let me go back to this one so we can use it as we go through. So we can use this as a guide. I have this text box, so I need to add that in. So let's add that in first. That's the easy part. I'll put it after the select box. How do I do that? Inputs, name equals, what do I put in here? Anything, right? It's just a name. It's just a name. So I can call it whatever I want. Capital box, I don't know. What else do I need? I need a type. And this has to be text. All right? So if I save this and go back here, it's not going to do anything because my page is broken, right? Yeah, it sure is. Why is that? That's going to bother me. That's frustrating. I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. I tried that. Yeah, let me try that real quick. That's a good idea, actually. Oh, that's nice. Yes, I would. Hang on. See, when I opened it, it doesn't have any of the stuff. It didn't save. It's just not saving my stuff for whatever reason. I don't know why, but it's just not saving my work in this file for whatever reason. That's okay. That's okay. I don't want to waste time figuring out why the IDE is not behaving. I'd rather just forge ahead and get this done. Okay. So I put in my text box. Is there anything else I need to do in terms of the form, manipulating the form? Okay, so we're good. Let's go down and take a look at the JavaScript now. So there's some stuff that we need to change. This piece, if they select none, that's good, right? That's still useful. This is going to change, right? We need to now check to see if they were correct or incorrect, if the country that they gave us is right or wrong. So how am I going to do that? What do I need to do? I need to change this else stuff. How do I check to see whether they were right or wrong? I need another if statement, or I could turn this into an else if statement if I wanted to. Either way would work, right? So I'll do it this way. Var capital equals this guy, and now I want to check the answer. How do I check to see if this is the same thing that they typed into the box? How do I check that? Yeah. I could create another variable for that, certainly. I don't think I have to, but I sure could. Let's do it. Var answer equals, how do I pull the answer out of the text box? What do I do? What do I need to say? Form.capitalBox.value, where this is the name that I assigned to that box up here, right? Capital box. And then .value gets me the contents of that box. Okay. So now we can check to see if they gave us the right answer, right? How do I do that? If capital equals answer, they got it right? So this alert becomes you are, whoa, caps lock. You are correct. I need some brackets in there. So if they didn't get it correct, then they must have typed in something incorrectly, right? So I can say else, and I'll just copy this over. Save me a little typing. You are incorrect. Right? So at this point, I would like to test this. Of course, I can't test this because my thing is mad at me right now. Let me see if it's decided to pick up on what I'm doing here yet. Nope, sure hasn't. I have another idea actually. Let me try this. Apache 50 stop. Okay. Maybe. Start. Come on. Wow, this is okay. I wasn't even typing and it was doing stuff. There's a ghost. There's a ghost. Let me just try and restart this. See if maybe that'll make a difference for me. Nope, sure doesn't. That's frustrating. All right, anyhow, you should test it. Can somebody verify that this does in fact do what we want it to do? We good? Great, fantastic. So we've actually already accomplished most of what we set out to do. We've got one piece left, which is checking that text box to see if they left it empty. Validating that text box. Where's that stuff going to go? Where do I want to do that? So let me go back up to the top here. You see I checked the drop-down box first, see if that's none. And then I try to see if they're right or not. Do I want to validate before this or after this? So I definitely, if we're going to validate stuff, I need to validate it before I use it. So since I'm using the value of this box here, my validation has to happen before this. If they leave it blank, then, and I try to do this, then it's too late. It's too late. I've already screwed up. I've already used a weird value. Right? So I want to validate before this. So I'm going to introduce a new condition. Else if, right? Else if what? How do I check to see if that box is empty? How do I check to see if that text box is empty? Let me put a little hint on the screen here for you. Form dot capital box. Oh, come on. Dot value. That's how I get the value out of the box, right? Now how do I check to see if it's empty? Dot length, that's a good idea. I could check the length to see if it's 0. There's another way. Double quotes. Double quotes is an empty string, a string that contains nothing. Right? This should work. Dot length would also probably work. Dot length would also probably work. I like that suggestion. Yeah. 2 single quotes with no space in the middle. I believe double quotes should do the same thing. Yep. And now, the tricky part, or the new part, I guess, is actually not particularly tricky. We want to add that message in. We want to insert that new message, right? We want to insert that new message in there that says you have to enter something in this box. So this is where we need to manipulate the DOM. Where do we want that message to go? Let me go back to my form here, and we can take a look. When I click submit, oh, yep, that still works. When I click submit, it appears right next to the button. It says you must enter a capital, right? So I want it to go after the submit button, right? Is this still part of the form or no? What do you guys think? Is this message still part of the form or is it outside of the form? What do you think? Still part of the form? Okay, I agree with you. I agree with you. So if I think of this in terms of the DOM, the form encapsulates this entire thing, right? The form wraps the entire thing. So I'm going to then get that form from the DOM. Actually, I already have it, right? Because we got it earlier. I'm going to append a child to that element. This is then a child of that form element, right? That's what we're going to do. It's really as easy as that. I'm going to say form dot append child. Whoops, append child. And now I just have to tell it what I want to append. In this case, all I'm appending is some text. I'm just appending a message, right? The way that we can do that is by saying document dot, what is it, create text node, and then we just specify whatever we want this text node to contain. Now, I did this all in one line, I probably should have split this up a little bit. Let me try this a little bit differently. Just to make it a little bit clearer what we're doing here, right? This is equivalent to what I just had up on the screen. I just split up into 2 lines to make it a little bit easier to see what's going on, so we can see it happening step by step. I create a text document with the message that I want, and then I append that to the form element of my DOM, within the DOM. Sound good? Again, I can't test this because my form is broken, but can you guys try this out? Let me know if it works or if I made a mistake. It should work. Does it work? Can anybody verify that it does or does not? Does it work? Yeah? Great. Excellent. We did it. We inserted something into the DOM. That's actually a very powerful technique. Now, there is one problem. There is one problem. I'll kind of leave you with a cliffhanger here. I want you to think about this one. We're not going to solve this one, at least not right now. Let me refresh this page. Let me start over again, if I can. I'm going to select a country. I'm going to click Submit. But then wait a second. I'm going to click Submit again. Oh. Uh-oh. Okay, so it works, right? It works a little bit too well. Works a little bit too well. Okay, so I want you to think about this problem. In fact, you probably will run into this problem on the studio as well. Think about how you might resolve this issue here. We're going to ask you to do something very similar on today's studio, but I want you to think about that. See if you can come up with a solution to this. Or maybe you like it this way. I mean, any questions? Any questions about what we've done today? Any questions at all? All right, that's all I have for you. So for the rest of the time, you can work on PSET or starting on the studio. There will be a talk starting around 7 o'clock, which is in just a few minutes, on security. So where's that going to be, Mike? Where are you set up? Over here? Oh, the TV's over there. Perfect. Yeah, so probably over on these tables over here. So if you're interested in that security talk, make your way in that direction. You'll probably get started on that in 5 to 10 minutes. Otherwise, let me know if you have any questions about the studio, about the PSET, about anything else. I'll do my best to help you out. Thank you. I'm sorry? Can I put the code back up? Sure. This part down here, probably. I'm going to post this on Piazza as well, like I typically do, but I'll leave it up here. Absolutely. I'll leave this up here.